There. So I know that I made a video and promised to talk about the history of Casey Court, the background there, and the notes I'd taken on the whole series, Casey Court and Nicole Long. And I'm getting to that. I really am. But I was recording another podcast. I do record them a bit in advance, although it didn't avoid this month's problem, but here we go. I do, anyway, on the podcast, I was discussing, as I have many, many times, the first romance that I read, which was The Taming of Tamsin, which I guess inspired me to read more romance between being a little kid and college and graduate school, and then also writing romance. So the book I decided to reread. So I first read this book, I'm looking at the copyright date, probably 1979, I guess, because the copyright's like late 1978. But I wasn't that old. So, but maybe a little bit later, maybe 1980. I don't know. I was really young though. But I decided to pull the book, The Taming of Tamsin, from my shelf and read it because I talk about it so often and I talk about its influence on me, but I haven't read it. I don't reread books generally. So I, so both my grandmothers died, and I took books mainly um, from their houses. And so this book is from, well, my paternal grandmother's house. My maternal grandmother, actually, different books. They're on a shelf somewhere. They're first editions of random popular books from the 40s and 50s. Anyway, I decided to reread the book over the weekend, and I'm gonna be honest, it's not good. I mean, the book is fine, the writing is fine. What is slightly awful are the messages. So I'm gonna spend just a few minutes with you breaking down. Oops. Oh my God, there we go. The Taming of Tamsin by Mary Wibberley. Oops, had to take a little break there because I realized that I had forgotten the notes. I took notes, but then left the iPad in a different room. So let me say this. I guess, okay, I remember two things about the book. I had completely forgotten the premise, and it doesn't start well. So, long story short, look. So, the book was released in, dear, I should have looked this up beforehand. Excuse me. Um, it just says, December. It was December 1978, and oh my God, it's printed in the U.S. I haven't seen a book printed in the U.S. in ages. They're mostly printed in China, to be frank. Okay, so okay, let's start. The heroine is Tamsin, hence the taming of her. The hero is a guy named Blaze. It takes place in the UK, in Yorkshire. This is most books I read took place in the US except for Presents, which were international. But it's interesting to know that they did back then. This was my memory, so it's probably great that a lot of the books, Harlequin and some other books, took place in the UK, but still were published in the US, and publishers hadn't yet gone to the place where they felt that the books needed to be Americanized. So the quotes are still like single quotes, and the punctuation and the spelling is completely UK English, British English. What's interesting, and I know this because I used to know somebody, well, who worked for Scholastic back in the day, Harry Potter, when they published it here, they changed the title of one of the books, but also they Americanized the books. So there are several things changed, at least in the earlier books, certainly the punctuation and spelling. And a couple of things changed to Americanize them because they didn't think that Americans understand, like Philosopher's Stone versus Sorcerer's Stone and things like that. And I always thought that was fascinating because when I was young, nobody seemed to think that we couldn't understand it. And it's actually how I learned most British phrases and spellings and, Lori and Spanner and all the words that they use for things that we don't use. And in this book, Horlicks, which I actually had to look up, which is like a a malt milk drink for children that's supposed to be healthy. I suspect it's not that healthy, but who knows? I will not speak on the Horlicks. I'm sure that the ingredients in the late 1800s were great, and the ingredients now, who the heck knows what's in that? And whether or not you'd sort of can actually, it sounded a lot like Ovaltine, which I've had never, so I can't speak on that. Okay, the premise of the book. So Tamsin's a young woman who works for her father. Her father runs a PI agency, more or less, the equivalent, whatever the equivalent of that in the UK is. And he has a case for her. So she comes into the office, sits on his desk, and he explains that there's these children, the parents are not getting along. The children, they're worried about the danger of, I believe, the father, it's very unclear, kidnapping the children. And for the moment, they're going to take, she's going to be in charge of like taking these children into a cabin, a house out in the countryside, and while they figure out the kidnapping potential like parent issue. Um, no, okay. So I start the book and I was like, I don't think I remembered children. There were whole plot moppets in the book that I literally didn't remember. I remembered the hero was a writer. He's a playwright who uses a pseudonym so he's not recognized, as if people are like mowing down playwrights everywhere. The playwright paparazzi is a problem, right? So I remembered that, but I didn't remember this. I remember the cabin, which maybe actually my favorite books are those the books where people are in a cabin. So maybe that's where it started. I had not thought about it. Although they're not isolated. There's no snow. Like they're isolated in the sense that they're supposed to be hidden away from this like potential kidnapping threat, but they're not isolated in the sense that like she goes to the store and stuff. So it starts off, she's sitting on his father's desk, and he's like, I have this thing for you. I need you to do this. And she's like, what? He's like, well, I know you like children, so this won't be a problem for you. Seems like the oddest assignment ever, like to send your daughter and that somebody else would entrust their children with them. But here we go. So she's doing that, and he's like, you're like a Spitfire, but look at you. You have like a black belt in judo and a brown belt in karate, or vice versa. And I'm like, okay. And she gets up off the desk after she takes the assignment. And they're trying to show this like really, I think, positive father-daughter relationship. She gets off the desk, he smacks her ass, literally, and then asks her to bring him coffee. I was like, okay. So she goes out and talks to his assistant, who, by the way, presumably he's not smacking her butt, and who doesn't have to bring him coffee. But I was like, that's an interesting relationship that you have with your dad. But okay, okay. So then, let's see. He trains his martial arts skills. Okay, so he sends her when like she goes out to talk to the assistant. The assistant's like, oh, did he tell you about the hitch? And I'm like, the hitch? And the hitch is, of course, that the children's uncle is going to be out there with them. But of course, he didn't tell Tamsin because she's a confirmed, quote here, man hater. There's a hyphen over there for you. And he knew that if she knew that there were like a single man out in the house, she wouldn't have taken the assignment. Which, by the way, fair. Just tuck her away with somebody we don't know who's paying for his service. But hey, hope it all goes well. Okay, so this is like so crazy. Um in the first line, he says, so they meet in the house. He brings the children in. The children are asleep in the first scene, which is perfect. They managed to do the child transfer of two children who are like 6 and 7 without anybody waking up. And I was like, I never mastered the child transfer, so very jealous. But moving on. So he says, he stood in front of the blazing fire and looked at Tamsin as she walked across the room towards him. I expected a woman, not a girl, he said, someone capable of looking after two children. Hold it, Tamsin cuts in. She stopped in front of him. What do you mean, a girl? I'm 22. 22. You look about 16. He glanced up her slowly from toes to top of her head. It's clear he didn't believe her. And you look like a bad-tempered swine, she retorted smartly, which you probably are, and bossy with it. Well, you don't boss me around, so let's get straight before we start. I don't know who you are, and I really don't care. I came to care for those two children upstairs, and I intend to do so. I'm perfectly capable of doing so alone, just for your information. Come off it. The corner of his mouth lifted in scorn. How well do you think you'd cope if their father came looking for them with a couple of his friends? By the way, the father's Italian. There's some like stereotypes about him and his friends, but we're not going to get into that. And she talks about having a black belt in June and a brown belt, yada 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 yada. After that, they have like a more of an interchange. I think it's supposed to be sparky and flirty, but is really not. Um, he calls her an aggressive little spitfire, which is lovely, and her eyes she has a lot of flashing eyes, um, and she calls him, "You're a typical boring aggressive male." So she's not going to be dismissed. He this is oh my god, this is like in chapter 2. He was much taller than she, also much too close, and he knew it. He made her uncomfortable, but he didn't care. He put his hand and tipped her chin slightly. Just remember that. Take your hand off me. Make me, he said softly. Oh, so very softly. Tamsin stood still and quiet for a moment. She was trying very hard to control her breathing. Then she moved. She knocked his hand away swiftly and swung away from him all in the same instant. See, she exclaimed. It was easy. Oh, he had swung her around and held both arms lightly just beneath the elbows, and she knew that she couldn't break the grip. So the first time he meets her, he holds her in an unbreakable grip because nothing sparks off romance like the threat of violence. She says, "Do you always use violence on women?" He says, "Only ones like you who ask for it." Probably. Have I hit? Possibly. Have I hit you? Because, okay. She says, "Not yet, but I wouldn't put anything past you." Neither would I at this point. He says, "I've never struck a woman in my life." His voice was calm and deadly. Because I like dead calm with "I've never hit a woman." All in the same like paragraph. That's how I like things. Um, so he lets go of her, right? I guess. And then he says, and this time there was no escape, none at all. This time when he held her, it was different. For one arm was around her, crushing her, and the other he cupped her face. Then he kissed her deeply and savagely and satisfyingly as she had never been kissed before. His eyes were dark, his voice harsh. "Now shut up," he said. He moved away from her, turned his back on her, and walked out of the kitchen. At which point, and then we're gonna get into it. Then they have a different conversation about how she's gonna they're gonna split up tasks. I don't know what the tasks are he does because we never get to that. But her tasks are making food and caring for the children, cleaning up the house, and doing the shopping. His tasks include his day job, which is playwriting. Which, to be fair, she was hired to do this job, but the first thing he asks her for is to make him dinner. After all this happens, and she goes to the kitchen, whips out some eggs, makes him an omelet, does not make food for him herself. He leaves, he eats the omelets, um, leaves the room, goes up to bed. She's like put out. Then she makes herself food because she made him food, served it to him, watched him eat before she made food for herself. Okay. Um, then she she goes to bed. She locks the door. And then he gets up the next morning, and then steals the key. And he's like, "You're not going to lock yourself in there. It's dangerous." Right. And she's like, "I got to keep myself from you." So subsequent nights, she literally props a chair, under the doorknob, which I've never done. I have no idea if it works. But this is what she does to keep herself safe. So, all that said, he's like, "You don't know about men in relationships, but he doesn't offer to teach her. He's just ill tempered." Okay, book's not that long. Middle of the book is the plot about the children. Turns out the father comes, talks to her, convinces her that he really loves the children. She gives him time with the children, which by the way was not the job, but protecting the children, but okay. And the Italian father, Mario Andretti and his friends, who knows what they're gonna do, right? And then she finds the father very sincere, reaches out to the mother, who I believe is the sister of the hero, but she does it in secret. I mean, she has a telephone. I mean, she's isolated, and it's the late 70s, but she does have a phone and a car. She calls the mom. The mom and the dad realize that their wires had crossed somehow because kidnapping, She's going to move back to Italy with the dad, reunites the parents with the kids, saves the day. Okay? That is the bulk of the middle of the book. at so then she's like, job completed, take me to the York train station. I'm going home. I think back to London. I actually don't remember that. And I can't with this. I can't. And before she leaves, right? Before she leaves, he's like, um, he meets her at the station or takes her to the station or whatever. Why have you come after me? To make me look a fool? No, to talk. He started the engine, waited for a lorry, see, to pass, and moved swiftly into traffic. I've nothing to say to you. Maybe not, but I have plenty to say to you, and I'm going to find somewhere quiet to do it. She didn't answer him. She looked out of the window instead. They left the city and Blaze drove down a quiet road where the houses were well set back from the road, where there's no traffic, and then he stopped because there's nothing more romantic than a guy taking you alone in a car to a dark, quiet area where there's no traffic. Okay, right? Now we can talk, talk away. I won't listen. I won't hear anything you got to say. Then, will you take notice of this? He asked, and pulled her into his arms. Then he kissed her. She struggled momentarily, an instinctive reaction, one she should probably honor. Then she stopped struggling and put her arms around him, and that was as it should be. He lifted his face slightly away and grinned at her. That's better. And she saw in his eyes what she'd seen before, and now she knew what it was. She saw love. You know, don't you? He said softly. Know what? That I love you. You hate me. It's a strange mixture, love. It hits you hard and it hurts sometimes, and it hit me harder when I realized. So I reacted. I fought back, and that's just what you were doing as well, weren't you? And that's how we know they're in love. Okay. Maybe the book's 40,000 words. Honestly, I read it in a couple hours yesterday. I have so many thoughts and so few. When you're reading books now, okay, for the most part. So there was this era, there was a lot of these books, presents books, straight Harlequin books, a lot of Brews and Kisses. It's always from the women's perspective. That didn't change until maybe the late 80s when they had the dual perspectives, maybe the early 90s. Um, so you don't know how he loves her, except I guess she saw it in his eyes. Okay. Um, I don't have enough words for this because reading it now, I have no idea because when I was young and read it, there was something about it that I found really compelling. I read the book many times when I was younger. But so I think my grandmother must have bought it contemporaneously to it being sold. Probably, oh my God, I wonder how much it cost. That's 95 cents. 95 cents. Okay. Anyway, which is I think about $6, 5.99 in current inflationary with inflation. I found out inflation gone up 382% since December 1978. Yes, I looked it up. Yes, I'm that person. So I I don't know what the message is about love, but I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing like bruising kisses, her being afraid and locking her room, putting the thing under the door, him holding her in a hole that she can't get out of, some martial arts hold she can't get out of, and all of this coming together, presumably as love. And yeah, I don't see it. Plus, she brought him food. She brought him breakfast in bed. She brought him lunch. She had to cater to him because, of course, he's a very important writer. I I wish I could like go back to that young person because what it started was like a domino effect. I mean, I read this book and then I read more and more and more and more. The books changed over time. And then one day I woke up and I was writing them, and my first published book was a romance. My first traditionally published book was a romance. So I don't know what it was. I went back and read it. I will keep the book forever. I couldn't tell you what it was about it. Reading it now, the messages are all wrong. It's anyway, going back to what I was actually going to say earlier, I sort of digressed. But we know now, reading books like 50 Shades of Grey or books sort of in that ilk, that we know that those messages, if like your friend said, this guy, and actually another, like a lot of the new adult books and stuff of that era, not necessarily 50 Shades, where the guy's like, I'm gonna like take your phone and I'm gonna give you my phone, or I'm gonna like give you a laptop and I'm gonna like hold you like minorly hostage. We or I'm gonna track you and all in the name of love and it's okay. And but we know that if your friend called you and said, I met this guy and he took my phone, but he replaced it with a phone that he can track me with, we'd be like waving the red flags. And no. And yet the difference between this and that is not that great. Now, I will say, and I have not written books like this myself, I would not write these kinds of books, that there has been a huge evolution in romance where women have agency and there are messages that for sometimes don't like are not enmeshed in the patriarchy, are not enmeshed in misogyny, violence, and ignoring red flags, but many of them are, and it is what it is. We think about it, or at least I think about it, in terms of it being fantasy, it not being real, and not taking real messages from it. But I think that in some sense, we do. What we do with that, I don't know. Do we internalize that? I don't know. But this first book changed my life, maybe for the better. I mean, I mean, I, I wouldn't say this book made me a writer, but it certainly like pushed me real hard on that path because I was like, up until then, the books I'd read were so children coded, like, Nancy Drew, like Hardy Boys, or very traditional, like American children's literature. And this is even before I think I read like Judy Blume and those kinds of things that were very boy goes on a like an adventure and saves saves himself, saves the day, saves somebody, changes, whatever, comes of age, those kinds of books. And this, maybe now that I'm thinking about it, maybe this is the first book I read where a woman was the main character. Not gonna say she played it the best way she could, but that may have been the hook. I'm really gonna like think about it a little bit more. But I wanted to reread it and see if it was as good or as bad as I remember. And I think it's a little bit of both. What I recommended, I don't know. Probably not. The author, by the way, is dead. I looked that up years ago, so nobody, no insults given. It's actually really fascinating. It's actually in the back. The Harlequin Reader Service, which I remember from when I was a kid, actually used to be like a little cardboard like tear out in the middle, and you get one free book, and then I think you got like the monthly books. But what's interesting is it lists like this is oh my god. Oh, this is the 1978. This is your 1978 Harlequin collection, starting with 102, Then Come Kiss Me, and ending with 151, A Taste for Love. Oh, the author's name is Joyce Dingwell. Okay, I have thoughts about that. But you can have like an order form where you can order the books in for $1.25 each, plus 25 cents to cover postage and handling. You can send it to New York or Ontario, where Harlequin used to be before it became a big five place. Order that, and if you order by December 31st, 1978, they will send the books to you. Just I looked at the expiration date. I was like, if I sent this now, what would happen? But I see that it has an expiration date. But those, I never ordered them, but I was always intrigued by the idea. What I just didn't want to do. Do you remember the penny record offer that people took? I didn't want to get roped into monthly books or monthly records, which I don't know what I would have done with all those albums. Oh my God. Anyway, so it's interesting. The evolution is interesting. I'm glad books evolved. I'm glad that women have their own agency. I'm glad they're mostly not wrapped in deep patriarchy and misogyny. But we can't discount these early books because they're the influence not only of me, but of many of the guests I've had. So, with that, I bid you a two. I'm going to go read something modern. Probably, actually, I'm going to probably finish, I think it's Let Him In by Lisa Jewell. Don't Let Him In by Lisa Jewell. Because who doesn't know a little psychological thriller with their rainy day? Thanks, and talk to you later.